Boys and girls, welcome to the HUD episode number 4. I almost said 5. It's getting to the point where I'm starting to forget the actual, episode numbers, which is actually kind of good, because I'm glad we're getting to the point where I'm starting to have to remember in my head, which episode is this one? How many episodes have we done already? So it's always a good thing. I think it's more of a positive thing than a negative thing, to be honest with you. But welcome everyone to episode number 4. This is not going to be a very, very long episode, but of course, every time I do say that, it tends to be some of the longer ones. I think the last episode I said was only going to be like an hour long, and then it turned into being like, like 2.5 hours. It was pretty long. But today we're going to be talking about the newly announced free agents, because yes, it seems that everyone who's not already on a major team has announced free agency. We've had some new organizations announce squads as well, being like Lethal Gaming, along with some others as well, ALG also. So we have a lot of awesome stuff to be talking about today on the HUD, and I'm glad that you are all joining me. As, like I said, it's going to be a pretty quick episode. Not going to be talking about things for too long, but I'm also going to be touching on the topic of Parasite's retirement. I want to point out that it's a temporary retirement, most likely, but whenever the Call of Duty scene hears that a temporary retirement is happening, everyone automatically thinks of Nadeshot and says, oh, it's most likely a permanent retirement. But I think with Parasite, it's going to be a different story, so of course we will be kind of talking about that. I'm actually going to check and make sure that this HUD TV tweet did go out correctly. And it did. Wonderful. I'm just making sure. Checking out everything. Make sure that everything's running smoothly. But there we go. All right. So there we are, getting this ready. All right, so first of all, before we even really talk about the topics of today, you can kind of see out to the right, the lineup, free agency, Parasite retires, as well as questions from the chat. So this entire episode, I'm really not going to have any problems taking questions from the chat. So if anyone has any thoughts, any questions relating to the certain topic that I am talking about, feel free to ask it, because, realistically, by the time the show's kind of over, I might have already answered some questions, as well as you guys kind of adding in your thoughts. Might even make it a little bit of a better show in the long run. So just kind of want to point that out there as well. I also want to throw out there that there will be coming very shortly. The HUD episodes will be going over to SoundCloud, so for those who don't want to really necessarily have to download YouTube videos or watch YouTube videos, I understand being someone who drives to work and it's kind of like a longer distance. I like watching podcasts, like having podcasts to listen to, so if you guys are really, really interested, and if you'd like to, if you want to go over to the SoundCloud, I believe it is under the HUD. If you search for episode 1, the exact title name, you should be able to find that. I can actually maybe even try to link it and see if that actually works. See if you guys can click this in the chat. If not, it's not a big deal. But if you can, see if you guys can click on that link, and I might take you to the SoundCloud, where I do have episode 1 waiting there. So if you guys are curious, want to check that out, feel free to do so. If you guys want to download episodes, as soon as I get finished with the episode, I will be uploading them to YouTube, with getting rid of the timers and stuff beforehand, as well as uploading them to SoundCloud, which is only going to be the audio versions who have never heard of SoundCloud before. So just getting that out there, just letting you guys know that, of course, for those who may be curious and are interested in kind of listening to different overall thoughts when it comes down to the HUD. Now, I see someone mentioning the HUD, or in the chat right now. Commands are also a thing now. Commands are also a thing. If you guys are curious, feel free to use the exclamation point, and it will give you a full list of the commands, being social, gamertag, and code red. And we might even throw in a SoundCloud one there for a link. So that's a really good idea. We will do that very shortly, George. Good point. So that in mind, let's hop into the topics for today. I'm not going to make this one very long. I'm telling myself this because maybe I'll actually listen. Maybe after I talk long enough about a certain topic, or maybe if I tell myself enough that this episode is not going to be very long, I might actually listen. So as far as the topics today, things that we're going to be covering is obviously Parasite's retirement, which will come in a little bit. The new Lethal Gaming roster, the new Team Allegiance roster, the rumor around the TK situation that's kind of going on with them dropping players and also adding players. Talking about qualified teams, because apparently there's a little bit of a rumor right now going on that qualified teams can actually make a change before champs. Have you guys heard that? You can actually potentially make a change. So, for example, if I'm Ox Gaming, if I'm Rise, if I'm FaZe, if I'm DT, if I'm LG, if I'm the European teams, or the ANZ teams who have qualified and they already have a spot at champs, I might, and this is the thing, I may be able to make at least one change. I said not at least, but at the most one change heading into champs. And that's not 100% sure, that's not 100% guaranteed. But by the way it sounds, it may be possible. So if there are free agents out there, if there are teams who are forming, trying to get into Orlando, sadly enough, I'm not sure when that delay or if that comes to pass, that could be a thing, which is very scary to think about. So, along with that, we'll be talking about that particular topic. Like I said, TK's thing. TSM actually announced a new pick of a player. Cloud9 Eclipse seems to kind of be split, and it seems that the new C9 roster hasn't necessarily been announced yet, but it has been practicing with one another, which I've talked about the other day. BLFire has announced. Khalifa has announced, I believe. Galore has announced. There's been a lot of guys who have announced free agency over the past maybe 20, 30 minutes. I think Llama God has as well, which everyone kind of already knows that one. Just due to past things that have been going on. So, really quickly, before we hop into the free agents topic of kind of updating you guys on all the roster stuff that has kind of gone down, I'm going to give you guys a quick recap on the champs qualification. Before every episode, I'm going to try my best to get you guys updated with every team that's qualified so far for Call of Duty Championships, which apparently these teams may or may not be able to still make a change, which is just absurd to me that we don't know that information that is out there, which also we'll kind of expand on that in a little bit. But the teams who have officially qualified are Kappa Academy, Champs Squad, Dream Team, Epsilon, Exertus, FaZe Clan, Giants, Hyper Games, Luminosity Gaming, Millennium, Mindfreak, Opti Gaming, Revoltables, Rise Nation, Splice, Supremacy, Team Envious, Team Infuse, Team LDLC, Team Orbit ANZ, Team Vitality, and the Chiefs Esports Club. So those are the current squads who have officially knocked their spot into the Call of Duty XP or the Call of Duty World League Championship, which is going to be happening, I believe, September 2nd. Through September 4th. Along with that, August 6th is MLG Orlando, and August 12th will be the official qualifiers for an A. As everyone knows, the ANZ and the EU qualifiers have kind of already been going on. And that's why you hear a lot of the teams who have recently been announced, being like the Kappa Academy, the Champ Squad, the Revoltables. Most of those teams come from the ANZ, if you're not familiar with who they are, because they're basically pickup teams. So they'll be looking for organizations heading into that as well. So, with that in mind, it is time now to talk about the current updates. I'm going to skim over the stuff that we talked about in the last episode, so if you guys are curious to want to hear me kind of expand in some ways on the fact about certain things or about these certain moments of these certain announcements that have kind of been made, feel free to check out the last episode. I fully go in depth with every single roster change, but I'll be going more in depth with the ones that I haven't already talked about. So the first one is Lacefield leaving H2K. It kind of started off all of the roster changes that have kind of happened. So Lacefield leaves the H2K roster. Llama God officially has left Cloud9. Cloud9, Dito announces himself and Mox will be looking for 2, which we kind of now have an update on that. And the last thing I believe that I talked about was TSM, who had rumoredly kind of lost Cold Chain. I wasn't 100% sure. But we now kind of know that is official. So first things first, all stuff that we talk about today, Lethal Gaming. They were one of the first organizations to announce their new roster, which will be consisting of the following players, I believe, being the players known as Twiz, Johnny, Miyagi, and TCM. So, for those who don't know, essentially, there have been some really good rosters that have came from Lethal Gaming in the past. Players like Mox, Glory, who's played on MW, Ares, who's played on Threes Up, Proto, Cade, and Ruiz, Holler, Reviction, Neglect, Incept, some really good guys. I believe those are just all off the top of my head. Guys who have previously played for this organization. They've been around for a very long time, and they've been competing in mostly tournaments of Advanced Warfare, where most of you guys will probably know them from. But these guys are, a pretty good organization from what I've seen. They were at Dallas, I believe. They were at DC, or at least one of the two. They ended up having a pretty good performance with one of their rosters, especially. But the new roster, though, is pretty interesting because, of course, Twiz, everyone knows of Twiz for trying to, in some ways, venture off to go to Europe to play, I believe, for Team Vitality. If my mind does serve me correctly, I know there were work visa issues, in which case he was trying to play toward the end of Stage 2. Didn't really realize the issues that would come with work visas, meaning that he couldn't actually compete or work for them, in some cases being along their roster. So in some case, him flying out there trying to play with the Europeans didn't really work out necessarily, meaning that he could not play. And of course, we all know how Team Vitality did toward the later parts of Stage 2 for Europe and whatnot. Which is kind of unfortunate. Johnny, who has recently kind of in some ways departed himself from the 100 Thieves lineup after in some ways being dropped, then coming back, then Aches and Remy being added to the lineup, then Royalty not really knowing what's going on. There's a lot of drama, of course, with the 100 Thieves lineup. A big one was obviously Examples and Johnny being released, and then Johnny coming back, and then we all know the story with that. So, been kind of a rough road for Johnny so far. A lot of people kind of in some ways have looked at his overall performance and saying, he's kind of is lacking. He's not really playing his best, but at times he has looked really, really solid. Guy that we haven't talked about in a while, though, Mr. Miyagi. I'm a big fan of Miyagi. Has been playing in really Call of Duty for a very long time at this point. But of course has announced to be on this roster as well. And I believe the last tournament that we might have heard from him was maybe at the Stage 1 online relegation qualifier, if my mind does serve me correctly. He might have been at Was he at South Carolina? He might have been at South Carolina. But as far as I know, heading into a major event, from what I've heard from, I don't even know if he's at Anaheim, to be honest. Maybe I should have checked that out, but I'm not 100% sure. But I know he was in the Stage 1 qualifier with Cream. He was with like Cyborg, Proofy, and I think Shake at the time. And he was also at, no, he was at the Anaheim Open. Or was he not at the Anaheim Open? No, he was. That's right. He was at the Anaheim Open. I do apologize. He was with Mochila. No, wait. I'm confused. I feel like he was at the Anaheim Open. Was he not? Maybe he was. I don't know. But I know he's been kind of... Either way, though. He's been playing kind of spot on, spot off. Hasn't really been playing as consistently. But he has been going to some of the events. But it's now nice to see him, obviously, with the Lethal Gaming roster, especially with these group of guys. With obviously these two. And also you have TCM, who has not been playing in a very long time. Why is that? Why hasn't TCM been playing? It's obviously the fact that he has recently became of age, which is very, very important to mention. TCM has officially reached as of age, which is obviously very, very important for his overall career. And I believe the last time that we've seen him was at the MLG, what was it? I think MLG World Finals, I think, with Orbit, maybe? Maybe I need to check that out. I think that was the last tournament that we could have had with him because, of course, now that Black Ops 3 is above the age of 18 limit, he hasn't really been able to play. That struck a number of different players, recently trying to get into the pool, who have been underage, and kind of throughout the entire season, we've seen a couple of guys who are underage slowly but surely make a little bit of a comeback. And of course, why not try to make a comeback as soon as you possibly can? TCM, of course, a very talented guy coming from Advanced Warfare, mostly a sub player, and I believe will be in some ways the objective for this team. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how the Lethal Gaming roster does. I do apologize. I think everyone was talking about Miyagi and stuff. These guys have teamed in the past, especially Miyagi and Johnny, who were, I believe, with Lethal at Anaheim. So they do have a little bit of experience, I guess you could say. So it's nice to see the Lethal Gaming organization. For those who might have missed it, Lethal Gaming will be Twiz, Johnny, Miyagi, and TCM. Have a good amount of subs. Interested to see how Twiz does, of course, coming back to the NA, and seeing how TCM most likely performs as well, kind of coming back, especially after a little bit of a hiatus due to something that he couldn't really change, because, of course, it's just his age. So with that in mind, we'll go and move on to the next roster, which is going to be Team Allegiance. Yes, for those who have followed the FPS scene, at least as far as Halo is concerned, you have heard of the Allegiance roster. Well, they have made their way as well into the Black Ops 3, or just really entering the Call of Duty scene. They've announced the roster of Exotic, Mochila, Remy, and Royalty, which was a team that we have seen for a very long time, kind of practicing with one another. The rumors of like BL Fire, who was on this team for a short time, I believe, in place of Mochila. So on and so forth. But we've been kind of talking about this team. I think in the last episode of the HUD, this was a roster who had been scrimming with each other more recently. I think they've been with each other for a little over a week now. I think as far as like this exact team. So it's exciting to see. You got some really talented sub players, being Exotic and Remy. Exotic being a fantastic sub, really one of the better selling guys that I've seen who've kind of gone unnoticed throughout this entire season just due to his age. For someone asking who is Exotic, I will answer that question because he was actually at the tournament EGLX. And if you guys would like to see more information on this particular team, I did talk about them in my last episode, kind of going over them in depth, who has kind of played for which team, the history behind these guys, and of course you do have the, in some ways, long-lasting guys, being Remy and Royalty, been playing with each other for a very long time. Of course, old TR teammates. Of course, Royalty was kind of released from that team, then later found his mark over on Epsilon and A in Advanced Warfare. Mochila, everyone knows Mochila, especially. Playing for Optic Nation, playing for Prophecy, playing for a number of different teams, AR even, and more really in history is concerned, like Curse back in Ghost and stuff like that. A very experienced player as well. Him and Royalty definitely going to be the main ARs for this roster as well. Yes, for those who didn't mention, I was thinking of Zarnik from like a more previous point of view. He did play for the TK roster over at Anaheim, but he is really talented though. I'm a big fan of Exotic. I've been watching them scrim a lot recently. This is definitely a team who I've been watching, I believe yesterday even, and I think they ended up taking out Envious in the 500 series. I believe they ended up losing 3-0 to the Elevate/Rise team that was formed. I think it was like maybe Looney Slacked, and then maybe Nagafin and Felony, maybe? I think that was the team. I just know it was like an Elevate and Rise combo. So they did end up beating Envy, which of course is just one matchup. You can't take that much from it. You can't say, oh, well, that means Allegiance is better than Envious. No, that's not true at all. But it still is obviously very important to kind of mention. So new ALG roster, new Team Allegiance roster. Welcome to the Call of Duty scene. Hopefully they are here to stay. And they do have a pretty talented team who I'm looking to see perform at Orlando especially. So With that in mind, we will go ahead and look at the next topic, which is going to be Team Kaliber. Yes, if you are a TK fan, it seems that rosters and players have been kind of swapped amongst things. Team Kaliber, who has previously been scrimming with the likes of Methods Theory, Godorex, and Apox, it seems that they have in some ways released Godorex and Apox, or at least decided to run with a few other guys. They have not officially, but kind of been playing with guys like Colchan and as well as Happy. We all kind of know where Happy's come from in past, playing with Cloud9, Colchan coming from TSM. Both subs, which is kind of important to mention as well because they get rid of 2 AR players, for the most part add in a sub as well as add in a sub/AR. Which is kind of interesting to kind of see that transition happen. So, yeah, TK releasing or no longer playing with Godorex and Apox to me is, it's kind of up in the air. I'm a big fan of especially Godorex, Apox as well. A very good AR player. Due to his credit, I kind of talked about him earlier through beginning of Black Ops 3 for EZG. Nearly qualified for Stage 1. Was 1 map away, but got reverse sweep by the question mark roster as well. The TK team, granted, I think they're a good roster. I think they have the capability to do big things. Really, I guess you could say good things, not necessarily big things. But my issue is just the roles on the team, right? The roles on the team, and of course, I haven't been able to see this exact roster play that much. I know they were playing last night, I believe. And how much can you really take from maybe one set of scrims or maybe one set of rotations and hard points and stuff like that? But my question is really about the ARs and the sub-regiment, right? Because, of course, you're going to have Methods most likely being the main AR, unless you switch back to Theory. Because, of course, we do know the early Black Ops 3 run with Theory and the TK guys didn't really work out too well. You switched to more of a sub, kind of a objective role, which kind of worked for him very, very well. We all know the run of Colchan. Colchan's been a very, very talented player for TSM, constantly a guy who's going to drop numbers, not really going to get a whole lot of hill time, but can definitely get the slang work done. So that to me adds exactly what TK needed. They needed a Slayer. They needed to kind of improve on the slang presence. But I feel like they needed to maybe keep Godorex and Apox. They needed to keep at least one of them to kind of run as far as the ARs are concerned. So I'm not saying get rid of Happy, then add in one of the previous players. But what I am saying, I think that's going to kind of make this overall team lack in the AR category, just for a number of different reasons. Because you can give Happy an AR, it's going to work, but how effectively is it going to work? Because people are asking you, I thought Methods was a sub. See, that's the thing. Over time, players can switch to a different role, but to me, I don't mind the switch at times. But generally, when it does happen, a lot of the times, the guy realizes, hey, maybe I should switch back to what I was just good at. Like maybe I made the transition. It was fine. I can run both. I can run a sub/AR. I can be the second sub. I can be the third sub. The second AR, third AR, whatever. Mostly third, if you want to kind of put it that way. The guy who kind of runs the second sub or the third AR. And they could do that. It's just, to me, it's very hard to find someone who could do both effectively at all times. And Happy, coming from the beginning when he was on Dream Team, was the definition of an objective player. Then over time for Cloud9, him and Llama God kind of held down the AR roles at times, kind of being that third AR and stuff like that. Methods coming from CLG was kind of like an SMG AR combo. Whether he was with BL Fire, whether he was with Accuracy, kind of just depended on what map it was on. But yeah, Methods. It seems that Methods is going to be the main AR for this team, which I'm not sure is how that's going to work. However, though, it's interesting to note as well that I think throughout Black Ops 3 we have slowly but transitioned to more of a sub oriented thing, or more of a sub oriented meta. Because if you notice right now, when it comes into Specialist Draft, it kind of, to me, dictates how the game is played. Because in the beginning of the game, people were running, a number of different weapons. They were running a number of different stuff. More specifically, things like the Scythe. And now you're going to start to see players kind of run more of a mobile setup, right? They run more of a mobile setup, meaning that they go for the Tempest rather than the Scythe because they want to be more mobile. You'll even see them in uplinks as well. Maybe even grab the Annihilator over the Scythe, which, of course, we've seen the Scythe been, I guess say, taken down a number of different notches, which, of course, makes sense. But there's a lot of free agents that I've noticed for right now. A lot of them, if like 85% of them right now, are all AR players. Which goes to show, of course, when it comes to certain maps, you need, more subs maybe, or maybe more subs are important. But generally, I feel like the game right now has kind of transitioned, especially over the last few months, to more of subs are more important, slang is more important. That's just kind of like it goes. That's kind of how it goes with certain Call of Duty titles, because over time, teams will start to develop, overall, rosters will start to develop a certain strategy or a certain meta to the game that no one really realizes. In the beginning of the game, everyone plays a little bit slower. They don't really know exactly how the maps are going to go. And that's just kind of how the entire title goes. Over time, you start to make certain moves happen. You start to play a little bit faster because, you know the maps. You know exactly what's going to happen. And especially if you have things like Afterburner in the game, if you have things like Overclock in the game, it makes the game play so much quicker. And a lot of the times, if one of those things makes it through, subs are in some ways the most prevalent weapons to have. If it comes down to hard points, a lot of the time, AR, you really maybe only need one, if not two, but more prevalently, you might need a sub to hop in the hill. So to me, I think over time, subs are more valuable than ARs at this point, but I feel like some teams disregard the fact that they don't really need a solid AR player. We'll just get someone who can maybe run a sub/AR or has run a sub, but that can make an AR happen. But I feel like your ARs, you've got to have someone who can, without a doubt, run an AR. You're going to have someone who can maybe play that staple AR, kind of in some ways play to the wind in some cases. Maybe even like an Envious, right? You have an Envious team who's, like, to me, like the perfect meta right now because they have Cap, who's a good AR player. He's not necessarily going to be running like the main AR as far as like the Scythe is concerned, but he can definitely do a lot of work around the map and kind of remain stationary. Then you have a guy like Slasher who is incredibly mobile and has a great AR shot, but also kind of plays the AR like a sub. And when at some points, whenever he needs to, he can kind of rush things out. So it's like the AR can be ran as both a sub and an AR for that secondary AR, but in his case, he can make it run like he's the first one. And then you obviously have the great sub duo in both John and Apathy, who can definitely get the slang work done. But to me, that the AR setup right now of Envious, to me, is like a setup that I think a lot of teams need to keep in mind. Not saying that Envious is the perfect team, that everyone needs to kind of run their setup or anything like that. I'm just saying, from my opinion, I think people need to realize and say, you know what, maybe we need to focus a bit more on ARs. I'm not focusing on TK at all. I'm just saying I think ARs are still more important than people give it credit for. And a lot of the times they can either make or break the team depending on how certain holds go. CTF games that kind of come down to the wire, uplink games as well, holding lanes, doing certain things. AR players are important, man. They can be regarded as one of the most important players on the team. Of course, there's only 4 of them. When you want to put the objective player, the AR player, whoever you want to put up there. But it's important. I think a lot of people and a lot of teams are kind of keeping that and kind of taking it for granted. That's just my opinion, though. Of course, everyone has their own opinion on certain things. We'll go and move on, though. I know I kind of talked about that topic for a number of different reasons, but I did want to mention it. I did want to kind of target it as well. We'll move on, though. TSM did announce the pickup of Burns for Orlando. I don't think we've seen an official tweet coming from Team Solo Mid as far as like their team Twitter is concerned, but I believe Burns did tweet out earlier today. I can actually get you the exact wording of what he said. I believe he said, I will be competing with at TSM Pac-Man, at TSM Wheats, at TSM Ivy, at MLG Orlando, seeking an org if they are interested, excited to be back. And I'm not sure why. What did I just say? Okay, that makes sense. My mind's all over the place. I apologize. The reason why TSM is not tweeting out from their official team Twitter is because they're no longer in the name TSM. That was really stupid of me. I apologize. But of course, it makes sense. It makes sense, obviously, stating the fact that because of Colchin not really playing with the team anymore, it makes sense, right? It makes sense, the fact that they have picked up another player. There was never like a word coming from the players saying that we've kind of going our separate ways. We're looking for one. But I'm not sure, and I love Burns, right? Burns is an awesome dude. I love Burns, one of my favorite players. Good overall dude. But what I think TSM needs is just, they need a Colchan, right? They needed what they just lost, because now when you look at the slang presence from this team, I think genuinely when you look at TSM, they had 2 main Slayers a majority of the time. I'm not saying that slang is always the dominant answer. I'm not saying that slang is always the thing that you have to look at and say, oh, that's what we're missing. That's the key factor that we're kind of neglecting on. That's when you see teams like LG and teams like DT completely throw out that strategy of saying that kills win you games, because a lot of the time DT doesn't even have positive KDs, yet they're still winning. You can even look at teams in Advanced Warfare like Enigma 6, even the Elevate roster as well, which was actually the TR team at the time. However, though, I think what TSM has done, or really if you want to call them question mark, because technically they were under the name of question mark, I feel like Burns is a great player to add to the team, but along with Ivy, you really don't have that much of a strong overall sub presence, because I know Ivy, right? I've casted over him in a number of different tournaments. I've casted over him even at EGLX, which was a local Canadian tournament where he did extremely well. which of course you're going to do well when you're not playing necessarily the highest, pro teams and whatnot. However, though, I'm just not super confident with this team. And if I'm an organization, I'm looking at this team and I'm saying, well, what do you bring to the table, right? What does this team bring to the table, in my opinion? Because you have two decent ARs, right? You have Pac-Man and Wheats, a long-time duo with each other, can definitely put up some numbers at times. Wheats more prevalently. But then you look at the subs, which is obviously very important, because granted, yeah, you can hold down a certain hard point, but really when you have the subs to kind of rush into a certain hill, are you really positive they can kind of bring that? Are you really positive they can kind of make that happen? And I'm not sure if that's the case. I'm not sure if Burns and Ivy can kind of go up against the top teams in the world and make a run or not. So I think the fact is that since Coltrane has left the team, which makes sense if he wants to leave the team, makes sense if he's not confident with the team, if he's not happy playing with them. From what I heard, that the TSM guys, which I can't really call them TSM guys, but I'm just going to refer to them as that, they weren't really happy playing with him, which is fine. If a chemistry thing is not there, it doesn't work. You know what? Make something happen, right? Make something happen. It's not that big. Granted, if you lose a player that's really talented, but if the chemistry's not there, then you're never going to succeed. So in some cases, it might look as like a dumb decision of people saying, well, why would they release their best player? Why would they release a guy who constantly drops numbers a number of different times? But if the chemistry's not there, then you're never going to place at a top level consistently. So with that in mind, they obviously lose Coltrane. They pick up Burns, sub for sub. I'm just not sure if Burns was necessarily the exact player that they needed. I'm not sure if another objective player would work. And I've talked about in previous episodes, even the last episode, whenever this team was rumored, before it was official, that we've seen objective duos who have played the exact same role not necessarily work out with one another. We've seen rosters in past try to maybe add another objective player. Maybe that'll kind of help them out in the long run. Maybe it will, right? Maybe anything can happen in this game. We haven't seen every single thing happen at Black Ops 3. It's not like Black Ops 3 has been out for 4 or 5 years till we know where this strategy can't work or this strategy has happened in the past. No, Black Ops 3 is still ever, it's a game that is still going to evolve even whenever it's the last tournament. We're still going to be seeing new meta evolve, even at the last tournament, even at Call of Duty XP, or if there's any tournaments after Call of Duty XP, which I don't think there will be. But even at Call of Duty XP, you're still going to see meta. Even at this point, till Call of Duty XP, meta will still be changing. Players will still be doing different strategies. And if anything, they'll be pulling out different strategies heading into the biggest tournament of the year. But that's the thing with Black Ops 3. The thing with Call of Duty is that you will still see certain things or certain setups for certain rosters happen. And you'll be like, wow, I didn't know that could actually exist. That's the thing with Call of Duty, man. That's the thing with Call of Duty throughout all of its, fame and glory, is that no matter what the case is, it will still be changing even at the very last tournament. So with that in mind, curious to see how the new to-be-decided team, the old TSM, does, of course, with the new announcement of picking up Burns off. Great player, great dude. Looking to see how he can obviously perform for this team. I'm not sure if he's going to try and step up as more of a slang type of role. That's going to be Ivy's position. I think out of the two, I would probably say maybe Burns a little bit more over Ivy, but you can see Burns being a little bit more inconsistent at times. Curious to see how this roster does. I'm curious to see how they overall do as well. And, as time does go on, we'll be obviously announcing whenever, their organization gets announced as well. So next thing we're going to talk about is Mox and Dito have both officially announced free agency. Apparently, what Mox has said that he was released from Cloud9 Eclipse, and I'm not sure if Dito has tweeted out whether he was released or not. But overall, it makes sense from Cloud9 Eclipse, right? Next tournament, Orlando is coming up quick. You're looking for two players. Well, most of them have already been snatched up. Dito, more of a sub, can also run an AR at times. Mox, designated AR, probably one of the better ARs that I've seen in a very long time. Probably one of the top free agents right now available. And it would be very, very shocking to me if Mox makes it through free agency and does not get picked up for a team by Orlando. But if you're in Cloud9 Eclipse's perspective, it's really, to me, it's not that surprising to see. Basically, what's happening right now with the Cloud9 roster, essentially, is that Cloud9 is trying to obviously form the team of Havoc and Assault, obviously major players from the regular Cloud9 team. Assault was thinking about leaving. He was playing with other teams. Like, you know what? We're going to form a roster around you guys, which is, of course, a great decision, right? Because you have two incredibly young players in both Assault and Havoc. One of them being an AR player, one of them being a sub. Many people have compared them to be the next generation of great Call of Duty players, and I would definitely, agree with that as far as like a younger perspective. And they want to form a roster around them. And the great thing that Cloud9 has done throughout this entire stage that no one has really replicated is having two teams and consistently making roster moves while substituting players from Cloud9 Eclipse into Cloud9. It's almost like, and don't take this the wrong way if you're from Cloud9 Eclipse or even support them, but it's almost like that's like their secondary team. And I'm not saying that they are, but it's almost like they are their secondary team, and they're basically taking the best players from that team and substituting them into their major lineup, and then getting rid of the guys who in the major lineup are kind of lacking, and then putting them in the, if you want to put it, the younger team, or the team who isn't as experienced or as good, the secondary team, essentially. Which has been a really good strategy for them. All the roster changes that they made throughout the year, adding Assault, who was on Cloud9 Eclipse, to the regular Cloud9 team, and for Mochilla. Mochilla goes to the Cloud9 Eclipse team. Granted, we all know how that kind of worked out in the end. But generally, they've had a lot of easy roster moves that have kind of only been intertwined with themselves, right? They've done a very, very smart thing, and I think that has to do with their previous history in other esports, right? That they've done a number of different great strategies that, I won't say a number of different strategies, but they've just been very smart with what they've done, right? And it's only fitting to me, it's only a good decision for them to release the remaining players for this team if they can kind of realize that, hey, free agency is happening. We have Dito and Mox, talented players in their own right. But do we really want to kind of put together a thrown-together roster heading into Orlando? Do we really want to make that happen? Do we really want to try and make something happen when we know it might not even work? We already have a good team that's going to be heading to this particular tournament who's already got a spot guaranteed. Is it really worth it in our opinion? Generally, you'd probably say most likely not. So then they're going to play the odds, not going to run with that team. Personally, totally understand that decision, respect that decision, and would probably do the exact same thing. However, though, you do have one player, not saying that Dito is not talented, I'm not saying that whatsoever, but you do have one guy, being Mox, who is very, very good. I mean, Mox to me is a guy who I can throw up there with some of the top players, not necessarily like top professional players, but one of the top guys who's kind of gone unnoticed a little bit. Him at him at Anaheim played very, very well. I didn't really know too much about him when Cloud9 announced the replacement, when they were adding him to the team. I was kind of curious to see how he performed. I didn't really know too much about him in past. But from what I've heard, from what I've seen, from what I've watched him play, he is very, very good. Which would be very surprising to me if I don't see him find a roster. People are saying, would he work for the TK team? Would he work for this particular team? Would he work for, add insert team name here? And honestly, I really think I would be very surprised if Mox does not find a team. And if he does not, that just goes to add and, kind of in some ways throw him in the pile of great AR players who are currently free agents right now. We talked about the number of guys who've kind of announced, like Galore, Apox, BLFire, Mox as well. You can throw up a number of different guys who have just over today announced free agency, or at least over time have announced free agency or been free agents, and have all been AR players. So to me, I think Mox is without a doubt someone that you've got to pick up. I've consistently seen him have great moments, so I'm curious to see how he performs. And I believe as well, going off of the free agents list that I've kind of mentioned, Khalifa and Galore both tweeted out they will not be tending Orlando. I think Galore is still looking for a team, but he's kind of throwing it out there saying, it's most likely not going to happen. Granted, kind of unfortunate for him, especially with the TK team moving the way that they did. And I believe Khalifa did also tweet out that he will be joining or teaming up with 3ZEP for Call of Duty XP, and will be looking for a team. So he kind of rejoins his old organization, a team that he's been playing, or an organization that he's been playing with for a majority of his career, especially throughout Advanced Warfare. Definitely where he got his major start with that team. Later left for Cloud9, heading into UMG South Carolina at the beginning of Black Ops 3, and it seems that he's kind of formed with one of his old rosters, or at least one of his own old organizations. So that's obviously great to see, as well. So along with that, I believe BLFire also tweeted out free agency. We know he's kind of been playing with a number of different teams. I believe he was playing with Royalty and Remy for a while, as well as Exotic. I think he was on that team. Then he was recently subbed a little bit a while ago with Mochilla. And I think him and Burnsoff were playing with each other. BLFire and Burnsoff were playing with each other for a while. Then that didn't really go their way. So there's been a number of different teams that he's been a part of, but just have not kind of came to fruition, which is kind of unfortunate. I really do enjoy BLFire's play. Even coming from stage 1 when he was on CLG, a very talented player. And it was always like very to me, really strange why he was released, because he was, without a doubt, the best player on that team, at least as far as slaying is concerned. I've never heard an issue with him as far as like chemistry-wise. Seems like a very respectable player, knows what his role is, and he does it very well. So, kind of surprised that we haven't seen Bielfire find a team. I think he's definitely at the level of someone who could pick him up. And if you're comparing him to maybe like an amateur guy or someone who's maybe not as talented, and if they're at the same skill level, you got to choose the veteran at all times. So Blind Fire, kind of surprised to see that he has not found a roster as of yet. But we'll be obviously keeping you guys up to date when it comes down to that particular stuff. So now the topics that we're going to be mentioning. I guess I can throw this out there, because I know this is basically like all announcement stuff and like little tidbits of my thoughts into it, which is stuff I like to do. But more of the stuff I like to do is talk about things that I know have happened and things that I'm want to talk about. So, really quickly, I want to mention that the notable targets who are currently out there are, guys who have kind of announced are Holler, Lamagod, Bielfire, Gunjar, Mox Dito, Godorex, Khalifa. I think Apox announced a little bit earlier that he might be teaming with someone, but you can throw him in there as well. Maybe insert player here if there are some other guys as well. I'm sure free agency has been announced while I've been even going live on the show today. So, with that in mind, still got a lot of notable targets out there. I believe every single person that I mentioned, Holler AR, Lamagod could be a sub, but also runs AR a lot of the time. Bielfire an AR, Gunjar's an AR. I know he's running with Cole a little bit yesterday as well. That's kind of remained to be seen. Mox is an AR, Dito's a sub most of the time. Godorex is an AR, and Khalifa is an AR. So literally 90% of the guys that I mentioned in that list are all AR players. So that just goes to show what I talked about earlier, that it seems that Call of Duty in some ways, at least in my opinion, is evolving and running to more of a sub type of game. And, neither here nor there, just my thoughts and my opinions on certain things. So, along with that, though, like I said, there are some really good talent out there. I was kind of being in discussions with some players as well as, team owners as well, like Big Snacks. I think Saint and Twiz were kind of getting involved with certain things that I was mentioning as well. Kind of just talking about certain players. There were a lot of teams that can form with the notable free agents that are available right now. I was thinking of like a Mox team, like a Mox and a Gunjar. Then you have like a Dito you could maybe throw in there. You just kind of tidbitting around with like rosters that I think could do well if the free agents decided to kind of group up together and play. But like I said, it's up in the air right now. It's not anything is guaranteed or decided yet, and we'll see what happens. Right, we'll see what happens. I think it's a good point that someone mentioned in the chat. Wonder when DT will officially transfer the roster. I believe Chino said in his stream yesterday, the day before, that by the end of the week they most likely have an announcement. So I'm glad that you brought that up. Thank you very much, Crawdad. Appreciate that a lot, man. So yes, it has not been announced yet, but apparently it will be happening soon when DT does announce what team will be officially picking up their roster. Of course, DT kind of clarifying that they will not be having this particular Call of Duty team anymore, and ever since then, DT happens to be going on a little bit of a run. So that spot kind of, in some ways, at least in my opinion, being labeled as even more and more valuable. So guys, we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we return, we talk about Parasite's retirement. Have a lot of talk about this. Not going to be going for too much longer. We're definitely want to kind of focus on what has been an interesting roster rating so far. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, boys and girls. It is the HUD, episode number 4. If you guys are new to the stream, make sure to be clicking the follow button to know exactly when we are going live. I forget to mention this every time, but if you guys would like to, social media listed at the top at the HUD TV for all the updates. It's when we go live. All updates about the show, everything goes on there. If you guys like to follow me personally on Twitter, make sure to follow me at LandoCod. Instagram, L1Lando, as well as AirLanded on YouTube, as well as make sure to, once this video does go up, I will be posting a link in every YouTube description to the SoundCloud video. And of course, it is audio only, which is definitely preferred when it comes down to a radio show. I just try to make the show for the streamer, or for the chat, more interesting when it comes down to this particular setup, but it is more of like a radio show than it is kind of like a video show, or like a streaming show. So just kind of keeping that in mind. Because to follow the stream, though, make sure to do so. Really, really do appreciate it, and it does also very much help out the channel. So yeah, let's obviously hop into the final topic of the show. If you guys have any questions at all throughout this entire topic, feel free to put those in the chat, and we will be kind of glancing over those as well. What we're going to talk about now, though, is obviously the retirement, which is more recently been announced by Parasite. But I'm going to be very delicate when it comes down to this topic, because when you do talk about one of the greats in Call of Duty esports, you have to give them a lot of credit, whether or not you agree with the decisions that they're making, whether you agree with their retirement, even if you agree with the retirement decision or not. It is their decision, and when you have greatness in Call of Duty, you do have to respect that. Regardless of whether you like a certain player, whether you respect a certain player, you think that his play style or his decision making is something that you don't agree with, you do have to give respect when someone has made it as far as they have, and whenever they want to call it quits or temporarily you call it quits. Because Call of Duty is not an easy game to play. It's not an easy game to play on a competitive level due to all of the, I don't want to say issues that we have, but with the Call of Duty scene being much different than a lot of other scenes as far as esports are concerned. Of course, it is console, not giving Call of Duty any. I'm trying to think. Not trying to give them any. What am I trying to say here? Credit or any extra steps, I guess you could say. However, though, it's not an easy title to play. It's not a game. It's not an easy esport to play either, because of the fact that it is a title. It's constantly evolving. It's constantly changing at all times. And whenever the game changes consistently, you're not necessarily playing the game that you fell in love with. You're playing with the title that you fell in love with. And of course, once that does evolve, a lot of the times it can change. In your opinion, it can change about the game. And if you guys get my point, right? You get my point. Call of Duty, you have to play at a professional level. You have to be playing at all times, nonstop, nearly every day. Not necessarily always 7 days a week, maybe 6 days a week, 10, 12 hours at times players are putting in there. When it comes down to the end of the game, of course, players start to kind of divvy down a little bit, not playing it as consistently as you would like. But truly, I am speaking of this, and I will be talking and bringing up this, not necessarily as Parasite's full retirement, because I do believe, I'm going to say this now, I do believe that he will make a comeback. Whenever Nadeshot announced his retirement, which is kind of what people are kind of comparing this to, or even when you want to kind of compare it to whenever Merc, Replays, and TP have made their decisions, it all came whenever they couldn't find a squad. It came whenever Replays couldn't find a team. When TP was released from LG, when he couldn't find a roster, or I guess Replays as well from LG, and when Merc couldn't qualify with TL, then he was like, where do I go from here, right? Where do I try to find a team from here? However, though, Parasite's in a different position because he did have a team. He did have Cole. He was on that team. He was playing with Ricky and Aches. He was playing with those guys. There wasn't really a major problem with that roster. There might have been not the team that he necessarily really wanted, but he was on a team. Parasite could have gone to Orlando. He could have gone to Call of Duty XP. If he found the right team, of course, because everyone knows qualification online can be a little bit sketchy, right? But he was not in a position similar to his counterparts that have officially retired, announced that they will not be coming back, which I don't believe that Merc, TP, or Replays will come back, unless something dramatic happens, which I do hope happens. I hope the Call of Duty scene has a major growth, and guys who have retired are like, I'm coming out of retirement. I want to play this game, right? But whenever Nadeshot announced his retirement, though, it was that he left the team to try to make them better because he wasn't necessarily confident in his skill, but he was kind of burnt out as well. He knew that the addition of adding someone else made the team better. And in Parasite's position, though, it's different. It's different. It's not that his skill is lacking. It's not that Parasite is lacking his skill to play at the top level, because everyone knows Parasite's a top player, man. Parasite has been a top player for a very long time. Parasite, to me, for a very long time, has been regarded as one of the top players in the game. Maybe not Ghosts. Ghost wasn't his best title, but Black Ops 2, Advanced Warfare, even before that, Black Ops 2, or not Black Ops 2, Black Ops 1, anything you want to throw out there, maybe even MW3. Parasite for a very long time, especially with the last 4 or 5 titles, has been considered to be a top player at all times. And has consistently proved that. He is the definition of consistency. He's also a world champ. Black Ops 2, for Eco Impact, one of the best teams of all time. A smaller dynasty, but definitely could have made something happen if they would have lasted. A world champ, not many people can say that or have that title. And one of the most knowledgeable players that Call of Duty has ever had. He's literally an analyst on the team. He's telling them exactly what is going wrong, whether you believe his opinion or not, and of course he can be wrong at times. But he's one of the most knowledgeable players that we have in the game. In the series. And in the entire series of Call of Duty, he's probably one of the most knowledgeable professional players that we've ever had, because he enjoys knowing little things about the game, which I personally respect a lot. He grinds out the game more than a lot of guys will give him credit for. And there's one thing, though, that kind of does hold him back, which, of course, is his overall determination to want to win. His big personality obviously comes at a little bit of a loss. It kind of, in some ways, discounts his skill a little bit. Because when you do look at him as an overall player, you can look at him and say, well, yeah, he's great. He's a great player. But generally, though, he's an even worse teammate. People will often say, and this is kind of like the term that I gave him, was that he might be the best player on the team, but he's the worst teammate. And when it comes down to chemistry is incredibly important, man. People don't realize the amount of importance that chemistry does bring to a team. From what I've been able to witness since Black Ops 1 up to this point, is that consistency as well as chemistry overall together as a roster can definitely put you ahead of some of the best teams in the world as far as like slaying power is concerned. And whenever you find a team that has chemistry and also has slang, that's when they start to become a dynasty. That's when they start to become a team who can compete with some of the best teams in the world, if not be the best team in the world. And a lot of the times the teams who have tried to do that with Parasite, they have the skill, or they can make the skill happen. He can provide that skill, but the chemistry will never be there because of the big personalities that are on the team. That's why it's hard to form some squads around Parasite, because it's hard to put him. It's often a very delicate topic to try to put him on rosters with Aches. It's often hard to bring him on rosters with Karma. It's hard to put him on rosters, with the players who have bigger personalities similar to himself. We've seen that with a number of different players, not even just him, right? Aches and Slasher. We know how that went, right? Incredibly talented team. Teep has mentioned countless times that if that roster would have worked out, that would have changed the game completely, and I totally agree with that. But the personalities clashed, the big personalities clashed as well, and a team who had an unmatchable amount of talent just did not last because of the big personalities and the chemistry that happened to lack. So like I said, one of the best players to be on a team, but one of the hardest players to work with. One of the worst teammates to have in some cases. And I'll say this, though. While Parasite is a great leader, there is a difference between being a leader and leading. There's a difference between being a leader and leading guys who want to be leaded. Or led. I think led's the better word to say. So I'm going to read you guys a certain point from the twit longer that he mentions. Because essentially what he does is he starts off the twit longer saying that he's quitting, and then as the time does go on, and the twit longer basically says that he's going to, or he states that he may return for Infinite Warfare. In some of the articles, though, we did talk about how everyone acts like they are friends in the Call of Duty scene, then in some ways are willing to stab each other in the back. Very cliquey is how we describe the competitive scene, the competitive players, the pro players in the scene right now. He did label them as, in some ways, spineless, but essentially is kind of what he labeled them as. So I'm going to read you guys the last two paragraphs. It's not very long at all, though. Last two paragraphs, actually maybe the last paragraph of his twit longer that he made. And in it, I'll go ahead and read it off. He says, lastly, regarding my attitude, I acknowledge that I have had a terrible history of being a bad teammate, and at times I know my temper has gotten the better of me, but I think the reputation building to that point is unjustified. It has become the norm to hate on me for my poor attitude, and it has been gassed up to the point where it's actually not possible to come back from, no matter how much I've actually tried. I've worked on my attitude quite a bit, and for those that may watch my streams on a daily basis, you'll probably be able to take note of that. I'm very tolerable under the utter BS I deal with from other players when it's just pure laziness in game or disrespect outside of it. I take it and hold it in as much as I can, keeping out my outbursts to a bare minimum. The hypocrisy is very real in this community, though. I often see or overhear players doing things or talking blank, while I know blank well, if I said the same thing, I would be crucified. Probably true. He didn't say that, but that's just me saying that. That is where I came to the realization that it doesn't matter what I do because this community is blinded by reputation when I constantly see others do similar, if it's not worse, and get away with it because they are loved by the community fans or just friends with this blank clicky community. I give up on all of it. It's not worth it to me. Thanks to all those who were with me and supported me throughout my Call of Duty career, but this marks the end of the road for me. Maybe one day, there you go, maybe one day I'll come back, but who knows? I doubt anything will change. If I get any offers worthwhile, I might stay, but the chances of that are very low. I'll probably still stream other games, maybe some COD on the side, but nothing too serious. Goodbye, everyone. Keep it real. And, of course, good luck, have fun. Well, very well worded, might I add. Very well worded from Mr. Christopher Parasite Duarte. I've heard his last name be quoted differently or pronounced differently. However, you can see, though, the frustration is definitely there. The frustration is there, and I can totally understand when it comes down to player clicks and things working out. That's why a lot of the times that teams have formed, it's like, well, why aren't they playing with this guy? Like, why are they not playing with the guy that's clearly more talented than this guy? It's not necessarily because of chemistry. It's because they like playing with him. They like how it feels to play with a guy. It's more fun to play with him because he's a lot lighter in the mood. It's not how Parasite is, man. If Parasite wants to win, he will get guys that he wants to win with. And if not, he will let you know why. He will let you know that you are not supposed to be on this team, or I'm not trying to say it. He wants to win, and if the team is just not there to win, if he doesn't think the team is going to win, then he will make that known, and he's not willing to practice as hard as he can because he knows that they're just not going to build up to anything. That was a major issue whenever the DT team tried to form when it was Killa and Chino who had dropped Cinder and Diabolic. Well, Cinder was dropped. Diabolic was trying to join Envious, instead of that time, they ended up actually having John join the roster. So Diabolic's like, oh no, I need to come back to DT. And during that time, they're trying to form a squad with Spacely, as well as Parasite. And then there was a little bit of drama that went on behind callouts going on and stuff like that. And where Parasite was basically saying, and kind of pointing out how well he was doing in the game and how Killa wasn't playing very well, and yet Killa was criticizing him and stuff like that. To me, though, like I said, there's a difference between leading and being a leader. Because in leading, regardless of what the people who you are trying to lead want, you're doing it anyway. And when you're being a leader, or when you are leading, that means that people want to be led and that they trust you to be a leader. You can't force yourself into a role in which case people don't necessarily want you to or haven't agreed to be in that particular case. So like I said earlier, got a lot of respect for Parasite. Ever since I joined the Call of Duty scene, I've always heard of Parasite's name. He's always been a consistent guy. Always been a great player, been a great competitor. One of the most passionate people that I've ever seen in the game. And that goes to show through his attitude, right? I mean, you can say the guy has a bad attitude, but the reason why he has a bad attitude is because he hates to lose. He literally despises to lose. He's probably one of the guys in the game who probably hates losing the very, very most. And so it's unfortunate to kind of, in some ways, for him to kind of admit defeat and admit a loss. I'm sure that making that Twitter longer was not easy for him to do. But you did hear a couple times, and really throughout the entire Twit longer, it kind of makes point because he says, you know what? If you read the beginning, he was like, I'm not going to have this happen anymore. I'm not going to let this happen. I'm not going to have the roster or have anyone do this to me again. The community's blinded. There's no way I can come back. And then at the very end, he says, I doubt anything will change. If I get any offers worthwhile, I might stay. I might stay. It's not that I won't. However, though, it just goes to show that the fight is still there. The fight is still there. Parasite still wants to play. It's not saying that I'm frustrated. I'm getting out of here. Goodbye, everyone. I'm frustrated. I'm getting out of here. Goodbye, everyone. I may come back. I may try to find a team again. I'm probably still going to play this game. And from what I've seen, I think he's been playing more recently than I've seen him play in a long time. Parasite's literally streaming consistently, man. He's playing consistently. He played with I2, a great amateur team right now in the scene. He's like filled with them for the 500 series. And I'm not hating on Parasite. I'm just saying that I think the drive is still there, that he still wants to play. And despite what everyone will give him a title or say that he, whatever you call him, a drama queen, Crowd mentioned in the chat, I don't have a problem with people labeling him as a bad teammate because it's true. He is a bad teammate. But that's the thing with having a bigger personality, is realizing it and kind of getting to the point where saying, you know what, maybe I do need a break. Maybe I do need to step away for a little bit and realize that maybe I, at some points, can maybe be the problem. Maybe I'm holding back the team from being the very best, even when I'm the most talented player skill-wise. I can kill people better than anyone else on the team. I'm better in that regard. But as far as a chemistry point of view, when it comes down to rotating and doing certain things, maybe I might be holding back the team in that particular perspective. So like I said, I got a lot of love for Parasite, man. He's a great guy. Talked to him a few times at events. Great dude. Great guy. He's a great guy to talk with. And he's got the drive, and I respect guys who want to win more than anything. The guy that I compare that to is Neslo. Neslo wants to win almost more than anyone I've ever met. I think Parasite and Neslo are two guys that I personally have met that are the most driven to win. And every time I talk to them at the event, they're like, I'm going to win this tournament. I don't care what anyone says about me. I don't care what the teams are thinking. I don't care what players are thinking, the community's thinking. I just want to win. And if I don't get first, if I don't place in the top 4, then it's a waste. It's a waste. It's a waste. All the time, the work that I put into it. I'm glad what Nestle's doing right now. He's on a roster with Echo Fox. He's confident in that team. He's confident in the organization. Echo Fox seem to be treating them very, very well, and he definitely deserves that. All the guys at Echo Fox deserve that. It's like a safe haven that they're in right now. However, though, I'm very positive that we'll see Parasite come back. I think this is a temporary thing. It's going to be very delicate, though, how he comes back, in my opinion. I don't think it's going to be like, hey, I'm coming back. Screw what I said. You know, the little post that's a bit longer than I made. It doesn't really mean anything. No. He's not going to do that, in my opinion. I think he's going to come back slowly, make a little bit of a transition, maybe play in some of these tournaments, play in the 500 series. And who knows? He might even be at Call of Duty XP, right? He might even be there. He's playing with some of the top teams. He's playing on a consistent level. His skill hasn't dropped in 2 days since he's said all this. It's not going to drop for a very long time. But I do have a lot of respect for Parasite. I know I've been talking about this for a very long time, but it's true, man. It's true. I know all the things that people say about him. I know all the things that people have mentioned and saying he's not a very good teammate. And there have been some times where I've said, why is Parasite even playing? Why is he even a player in the Call of Duty scene? How is he even about? He does not deserve the term of being called a professional. And during those points, I did realize that, you know what? It's just a personality thing. It's just a personality thing where someone wants to win so bad. Many times it can kind of be blinded and out showcase in some ways the ability that they do have. Kind of outweigh the skill because of the overall presence of what they bring to the table. So Parasite, good luck, my friend. If you watch the show, if you've watched anything from me, good luck. I hope you do return to the scene. I hope that your leave of absence is good. Hope it's like a breath of fresh air, but you're ready to come back for Infinite Warfare. Maybe even Call of Duty XP, right? I wouldn't be mad if he came for Call of Duty XP. Wouldn't be mad at all. But I do agree that he does need to take a little bit of a break. After I heard the things that he said in the DT call, whenever he was talking about the arguments that he was making and stuff like that, and it really wasn't necessary. It really was a point where it was like you're just kind of arguing for no apparent reason, and the guys on DT were kind of like, "What is going on right now? Like, what are we even? Why are we even arguing about this particular topic for so long?" But I do have a lot of respect for Parasite, and I do hope that he returns. He's a great guy, out of the game. In game, though, is where he really needs to work on things, and I'm sure that's going to happen. Well, guys, that's going to do it for episode number 4 of the HUD. Like I said, I know it was a little bit of a shorter episode, but I wanted to give you guys an update on what has happened. I know there are probably teams who are playing with each other right now. I know I've been seeing people saying, Mochilla's playing with certain teams, or Mochilla's playing with a different roster than he was the other day, or something like that's going on. Of course, that will be like an update for another episode, or for another episode of the HUD. I do appreciate everyone who has been tuning in. I know we're not at the highest viewership that we've ever been at right now. But I do appreciate everyone who has tuned in, not necessarily for every episode, for the episodes that you have tuned in for. If you've watched any episode, if you just watched this one, I really, really do appreciate it. You guys keep the show going. I love being able to have a show where I can come on at any point, just talk about Call of Duty. Because what I love to do. I could talk about Call of Duty for hours. I could literally sit here and talk about Parasite's retirement, talk about all the free agents, how the game's evolving from a slower-paced game to now a faster-paced game. Talk about that for hours, and I would love to do that. But I don't want to ramble for too long. So, guys, thank you so much for tuning in to the HUD episode number 4. Free agents galore and Parasite's retirement. We've covered just about everything that we possibly can. I could expand on a number of different things, but I'm not going to do that. If you guys are in the stream, if you guys haven't visited the stream yet, make sure to visit the stream. I never really advertised for those who are on YouTube. If you guys would like to, there's always a link in the description to the stream that I have, the HUD stream, twitch.tv/L1Lando. So we stream, it's not every day, but every other day or every 2 or 3 days, normally when a stream happens. I'll be having work more frequently now, so it might be here or there. You might see like a little bit of a random announcement here and there like I had today. And it wasn't like necessarily like a build-up thing. Like last episode, I had like a full graphic made and stuff like that. I love to do that. I love to obviously have to be prepared. But whenever I saw these free agents being announced, I wanted everyone to kind of be updated and stuff like that. So that's where we're at, guys. Thank you so much for tuning into the HUD this week. If you guys are in the stream right now, make sure to follow to make sure you're obviously up to date on every episode that happens. If you guys that subscribe on YouTube, make sure to do that as well. Airlanded, if you guys are on the Twitch stream or even in SoundCloud, make sure to do that. SoundCloud will be linked in the YouTube description. And social media is listed above, guys. Thank you so much for tuning into the HUD again. I see you all next time. Have a fantastic week and a fantastic time. And to answer your question, Originals, when is this going up? It will be going up on SoundCloud as well as YouTube, I believe, at 10 a.m. in the morning. Maybe even SoundCloud a little bit earlier than that. Maybe even tonight. So yeah, that's what we're looking right now, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in yet again. I'll see you guys all later. Have a fantastic night. And peace out.